Anyway, hello everyone, and namaste from Luvena, and I've got with me Yogrishi Sai. And both of us, first of all, would like to thank you for your patience, because I know some of you already were waiting for us on the Facebook page. You've sent me messages, and you've been very kind to understand that the situation that we are in right now, the circumstances are such that everybody is on the virtual plane and virtual plane of sorts, and everybody is on line. And over the weekend at this time, this is a very busy time, right, Sai? So
Right.
we decided to still have that conversation because we're prepared for it, and then we'll have it recorded for you. So welcome to Sutra Conversations. This is something that Sai and I discussed in depth over the past few days, and following on from our various conversations at in the Yoga Sutra deep dive Facebook group as well. So Sai, a few words from you before we begin.
Of course. First of all, I want to thank you, Luvena, for having me on the Curvy Yoga live chat. I know we could not go live on FB, but I think this is good enough, and I can see you clearly. And it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you about yoga. And that's what it's like a living thing in us, right? Yoga, and we talk about it, and we breathe, we dream, we are in yoga all the time. And then it's a pleasure to be able to talk to another yogi, and who is well known in Bangalore. So I'm glad you invited me for this chat. Let's have a good kind of a discussion with a prayer, if you don't mind. So, like I mentioned, I have my book, from 𝐘𝐨𝐿. You also have that. Awesome. So we will chant a prayer to sage Patanjali. Let's see. I'm going to chant in the tradition of Krishnamacharya. I know you have, of course, come from a different tradition, and that is why this conversation is going to be even more interesting, right?
Yeah.
So let's just offer this prayer to him, thank him, and also thank for the safety of this world, because there is one line where maybe after the chanting we can discuss that. Om yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yogakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranadosmi abahu purushakaram shankhachakrasidharinam sahasrashirasam shvetam pranamami patanjalim Srimate Anantaya Nagarajaya Namo Namaha. Thank you so much for joining. So I was talking about the removal of toxins from the body. Malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena. So Patanjali is also an expert in Ayurveda.
He was, yes.
Yes. So this particular line, I hope all the waste from the world gets removed.
Mm. Yeah. It is actually, it's very interesting when we study philosophy that anything from the wisdom tradition is not just, it's not isolated from the other. So spiritual traditions are combined along with wellness traditions, along with the tradition of culture and lifestyle. So they are all integrated and all interrelated. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Right. You like, I know we are going to discuss about yoga. So maybe I can take that up once you start with our sutras,
Yeah, sure. So
something related to this. Yeah.
yeah. So when we study the sutras, Sai, I know we were speaking about it, and we were thinking of the context of why we are studying the sutras, and it's very interesting because some of the points always they relate to, like, when people study the sutras of the philosophy, they assume it to be very linear. They assume it to be something that is very isolated from where we are today, and the more we study it and the more deeper we get, we realize how connected that philosophy is to what we are doing today, and not just our yogic life, or not just our
Right.
asana practice. It's even how we understand the chaos that's around us right now. This the
Right.
lockdown, or when we are just isolated from everyone else, this social distancing of sorts. It all just plays
Right.
into it,
Right.
right?
I have something interesting regarding that. Maybe I'll share it towards the end of it, because I happened to listen to Sridharan sir, who is my teacher from 𝐘𝐨𝐿.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of him. So he had a webinar yesterday,
Hmm.
and his favorite topic is Vyūham model. I don't know if you have heard of it, Vyūham.
Vyuham.
It's a kind of a theory they have developed from Yoga Sutra. Maybe we can have a separate,
Hmm. Conversation on
live
that. Yeah.
on that. Yeah, because it's a beautiful model. How they how you can work towards removing dukkha, heyam dukkam
Ah,
anagatam. That is how you
how
can
you can
avoid.
remove.
So they built some theory around it,
Hmm.
and he has shared something relevant to what we are going through today. Maybe I'll end my discussion today with his ideas, which hopefully will help everyone who would be listening to our conversation.
Right. And it's a good thing because then it actually builds the continuum also of what we leave leave
Yes,
ourselves and people who are listening or
yes,
watching in as well. And then how it leads on to further seeking.
absolutely. We are all seekers. We are all
We
seekers.
all are.
We Yes, and we need to become seers.
Eventually, I know. But it's
Yes.
important to note that
Now we are
wherever we are,
students.
yeah, and it's important to
Yes,
note that wherever we are, at this point, we are still seeking, right?
yes, yes.
There was something that I
We.
wanted to also mention, to everybody that,
Mhm.
see, this is to acknowledge also everyone that we teach, Sai and I teach students right now, but by no way what we speak today is our teaching. It's not ours. We are
No.
channels. Yeah, we have
Yes,
received
yes.
this from our teachers, from masters. So whatever we speak is something that has been taught to us, has been handed down by our teachers to us. Experience has made us see things differently, but the wisdom is not ours. The wisdom is timeless. We are just channels for it. And as I said just before,
Absolutely.
we come from two different lineages. We come from two different
Yes,
schools of thought, and we are taught the scriptures differently. We are taught uh, the philosophy differently, right, Sai? We're taught even how to chant and
abs-
how to understand it differently. But at the end of the day, there was
absolutely.
something very beautiful that Sai said. I don't remember if it was this morning or yesterday, saying that regardless of where we come from, we are moving towards the same goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. Interesting, because you mentioned there are so many lineages, so many traditions, and you won't believe, if when we talk about yoga, the definitions. You remember
Yeah.
how many definitions are there for
Oh, I
yoga,
know,
and
really.
and you can pick what works for you, right? So
Exactly.
do you I just wanted to ask you, like, maybe I know you can start with the first sutra, but I wanted to ask you, like, I know you've read about many definitions, which one is maybe closest to you that you like? Maybe you can share.
Oh, that is very, very difficult to answer, because you see, when I first started off with my philosophy journey, it was easy because, you know, the nearest one that you hear, the usual one, someone tells you that it's union, and you repeat it everywhere. You go union, 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 and everything. And then it's only later, it's only if you're really looking for depth, then you realize that the word in itself is present in so many scriptures, in so many
you know, even in Bible,
yes.
There are eight they have repeated 8 times yoking.
Okay, that I don't know. Now, okay, so now you've put me on the spot here, that I know the scriptures better than the Bible at this point in time. So I'll have to go and check that. But I'm not surprised.
No, even I didn't know. I heard that. I have not read, but I heard that there are around 8 times. And in all the scriptures, even if you take Holy Quran or Bible or any other scriptures, there's union or yoking, which is nothing but yoga. Maybe they're not mentioned as yoga, but yoking is mentioned.
Yeah.
So that is anyway, the yuj is the origin is yuj.
Yes. You know, I always make it a point to mention this, that it was only when I had studied the Bhagavad Gita that my faith made sense to me. You know, when I talk about faith, I don't talk about religion. I'm not talking about the rituals. I'm talking about that connection or that spiritual essence of it. That started making sense to me only when I studied the Gita. So when I speak about the scriptures now, when I talk about the sutras, somehow I remember something from the Bhagavad Gita that connects to it. Sometimes it's the Sankhya philosophy. Sometimes it is something from the Upanishads that, you know, that connect. They're like little dots connecting and all of them saying the same thing. At other times,
I just
it is
want
the
to
Bible.
add, when you talk about Bhagavad Gita, if you really look at it, Bhagavad Gita is not a religious scripture. You know that,
it isn't,
right?
Of course, yes, it isn't.
It isn't. It is nothing but a psychology, master of psychology.
Yes,
right?
Between the Bhagavad Gita and the sutras.
Absolutely, and yoga, it is not a religion at all. Like we discussed, it's not a religion. It is a science. It is a method for you to reach your goal. And that is what most of the religion teach. Like they teach the same, but they put rules and conventions and commandments. But in Yoga Sutra, you are the experimenter here. Right, you are the scientist. You experiment. There is nobody who's going to guide, kind of tell you this is how it is going. You need to experience it yourself. So it's an experimental path, and it is very tough because see, you have seen how the typical scientists look like, right? And I mean, so in a way, these yogis are scientists who who are treading a very difficult path, and but it is the most satisfying and fulfilling one.
It is. So I think maybe this is a good way for us to actually begin with the first sutra. So right, so we're speaking about the first 4 sutras today, and actually, Sai, before we begin with the first sutra, why did we choose to pick up the first 4 sutras?
Okay, so I know, these first 4 sutras, if you can't get this, if you don't understand what is this all about, these 4 sutras, because Patanjali has literally, kind of summarized the crux of the whole book in these 4 sutras. So if you don't learn this, you will not be able to proceed further in the path. So that is my understanding, and it has been the same. And I have, understood that if I had not learned it the way it has to be learned from our masters, and also reading various books, and I read various books from various authors. These 4 sutras, I want to understand and read it and kind of commit it into my memory, their thoughts, and so that it stays with me. And now when I read further, I am able to understand it much more better, because without this, you may not need, if you understand this, you may not read the whole book, you don't need, but if you want to progress, then you need to read the rest. If you need to practice, if you have to practice, then you need to learn more, especially the Ashtanga and Kriya Yoga, all those techniques we need to learn if we have to progress. But then if we understand, when we talk about it today, when we kind of dissect it today, we will learn more about it. And I will share, apart from what I have read, how I kind of really apply it into my own life, my daily life.
Nice. Okay. So, our first sutra then, in
just
Samādhi
before
Pāda.
we start, I just wanted to talk about Patanjali a little bit. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so about Patanjali, we just prayed to him, but there is not much data about him. Who is Patanjali, right? When maybe someone say that he was about 2,500 years ago he was living, and then he compiled these sutras 2,500 years ago. But they say that he was just a codifier, right? He just codified the existing knowledge, which was practiced. It was like a living tradition. So he just codified it because it had gone, and it was kind of gone out of hand or something. Like, there were various schools coming in, and so he kind of brought it into the sutra form, mainly meant for teachers, like we discussed yesterday. And the origin, if we are looking for the originator, they say Hiranyagarbha. The first man to walk on the earth. He is the one who taught this yoga. And there is also attribution to Lord Shiva, but more towards in the Hindu tradition, they say it's Hiranyagarbha who's taught this to the rest of the community, the rest of the humanity. There is one more interesting thing that I read, about Patanjali. You won't believe that it was Patanjali. It's in the occult tradition. They say that he was known as Govinda Yogi. And Govinda Yogi initiated Shankaracharya into yoga. So I just wanted to share that interesting story about Patanjali.
Where did you read that?
I can't recollect, because whichever place I go, I pick a Yoga Sutra book and I read it. And something that I read, I make a note in my notepad. So maybe we need to read a little bit more about Govinda Yogi and to see maybe, from where it is coming.
I think so too. In fact, when you said that where it's codified from and where it comes from, it is important for us to also realize that, right from the first sutra, it is something that we understand that Patanjali he has not founded it for us. He has not created it or started it for us to follow. It has been around for a long time, and like there are different forms of yoga and all the different ways of practicing yoga, Patanjali has codified one system of it, the system that goes through the mind, using the psychology of practice and of understanding and cognition and all of that. So, and also that the sutras, especially by Patanjali, are influenced by a number of other scriptures and other darshanas that we have. So he is very strongly influenced by the Sankhya philosophy. So when, and like the sutra, which is being used to codify or to hold all this information, when you say it is for teachers, it is because a teacher would have already learned something before. So for them to actually practice this or experiment on this, they would have already some background knowledge or sufficient background knowledge of Sankhya to plug it into this and then take it on.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
it's very interesting because when we study, and my own teacher, Pradeep, when he had told me, when I told him, I said I was getting on to my Sutra study, and he said, don't begin your Sutra study. To begin your Sutra study, you need to have Vyasa commentary. And I said, okay. And so it's the Vyasa commentary, which also has sutras, but they give a background to the sutra, to the Yogasūtras, based on Sankhya. So it gives you an understanding as to what you need to know, or where is this sutra coming from. So when we translate it today, when there are so many English translations, that's not sufficient, because a translation which is not backed on, or it's not on a foundation of a deeper philosophy, is pointless.
Right.
Because you don't know who's translating and what they're saying. So maybe
Absolutely.
we should actually begin with our first sutra then.
Yes, definitely.
So our first sutra, Atha Yoga Shasanam. So how do we go about it? I read it out in the exact way, because yesterday we said that in some traditions, or in the Vedic tradition, it's chanted. And here we read it. People have read it. Yeah.
So maybe I can just chant once.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's do both the traditions. So let me chant the 4 sutras, so that there is a continuity. I'll chant the first 4 sutras. Okay, then we'll take it one by one.
And you'll be chanting it. Sorry, you'll be chanting it in the 𝐾𝐨𝐻, in the Krishnamacharya tradition.
Yes, Krishnamacharya tradition. Atha Yogasūtras. Sorry. Yogaha chittavritti nirodhaha tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam vritti sarupyam itaratra. So it goes like that, and when we continue, it automatically takes you to a quiet place. It happens, and it's mainly because of the intonations of the script.
Sutra, the script.
So yes, so that, and then it just builds on you. So sometimes I sit and chant for my students. They say, "Sir, today we don't need class. Just chant this."
Yeah, I was very curious also about how we chant it, because I chant it very differently. I've already told you how I chant it. It's a very different way, and I think
it's not wrong.
Of course, it isn't. It's just that for anyone else also, it's just a different way. It's a different way of how we've been taught, and it's a different way of how we actually how we chant it.
One more benefit of this chanting with intonation is that obviously it creates vibrations in your and the energy. There is a change in the energy. Plus, easy to memorize, because you're breaking down the words. If you look at it, the words have been broken down, and assimilation. Like now you know that okay, there are 3 words. Like see, I'll break down here also. I think there are not many, but
the first one is not. Maybe in the 4th one, in a way.
Yes. So we can break it down. So understanding also becomes, so memorization, understanding, then the creation of vibration, and all this works.
It does.
And then
Yes, because I know that even when we studied this one, so let's take our very first Yoga Sutra, right? So when we talk about it, I always say that people usually skip this sutra, right? When they have to translate it. Atha Yoga Shasanam. Okay, now this is where we begin. But we know that the sutras are very precious. If they were easily so skipped like a title, Patanjali would not have wasted that sutra at all. He would just have started with the second one.
Absolutely, absolutely, because some of them they just say that Atha Yoga Anusasana means it's a auspicious start, which is wrong.
Yeah, it isn't.
Because everything starts, everything is auspicious, and Patanjali will not waste a word like you mentioned to say that it is an auspicious one, because he is not talking about anything related to religion or rituals
or the auspiciousness of it.
No, he doesn't. He says, see, the discipline starts here.
Yes.
Right now. So now is a very important word here, because my understanding is that maybe you want to continue, and then I'll add my thoughts.
So the way I had understood it, when we say now, atha, it was not so much in terms of saying, okay, now we begin. It was as if now we're undertaking, an undertaking now based on what has already been studied and practiced for so long. And that is what he's bringing now. So, it has the word, even atha, has been used many times in the sutras, many times in scriptures, when you're saying, okay, now this means that it comes along with so much more. So when I was studying the commentary, that was what was most striking, because this sutra reminded us of all the gunas that we need to study of, reminds us of Purusha, what is Purusha, where is it coming from, why undertake the study? That was the question here. Why do you need to undertake it? It is not because I have something to teach. It is not because you want me to teach. It is because the subject itself exists to be taught. So I and you don't figure in it. And it is that larger picture that is the potency of this sutra, to say that it is beyond you and me. So if you and I suddenly come and say, Sai, we know so much, and let's just write a book on it, for what?
I completely agree. Just to add to that, over the years of my teaching and reading some of these books and my own understanding, we all have to experiment. I realized that apart from mentioning that, okay, yes, this is a knowledge that existed, and it is meant for teachers. Now there is one more thing here. When he says now, suppose we have experience of our teachers telling us, okay, so you have completed this, now you do this. So there was a preliminary involved. There was a preparation involved. So you need to complete that preparation or preliminaries to be eligible to start study. You know what I'm saying? So there was some preliminary. So that's why the teacher said now. That means, yes, you have accomplished the preliminaries. Now let's start the discipline of yoga.
Yes.
Right? So the preliminaries could be like something like, it's not easy for anyone to just study this Yoga Sutra. You mentioned that it is one of the toughest things. Now, so if somebody has to learn this, some pre-work is definitely will be given. Even in simple trainings today, there is pre-work, right? In corporate training, there is always pre-work.
So then, does this answer our question that the entire yoga world that they call today, right? What is yoga? When we say what is yoga, right? And we have Instagram accounts, and we have asana classes, and we have all of these things going on. What exactly answers the question then? What is yoga?
Oh, you mean to say if there was a preliminary involved?
Even if there is a preliminary involved, and through the sutras, as opposed to all our asana classes, is that really yoga?
No, they are actually processes. Yoga, see, like I mentioned, like I asked you, like, which one is the closest definition to you? So I have a couple of them, so when you ask me, I think I will answer that. One is just one word, Samadhi. Samadhi is yoga, because, in the Samadhi, we should not get confused with all the commentaries written on it, like, tons of literature written on a Samadhi word, because it is such a powerful thing. You can write a book on it, and still you can write another book on it, on Samadhi, because, it is such an amazing concept. Now, for me, Samadhi is, like we mentioned about Anandamaya, right? To be in Anandamaya, to be in optimal health, to be happy, to be diseaseless, to be able to function in this world consciously, right? Because, see, we cannot sit for 5 hours on 6 hours like a yogi and expect, for things to happen for us. It's not going to happen. So what is the practical thing for me? So I have come up with my own definition. Like, Samadhi is a state of happiness for me, like where I am completely healthy, I'm joyful, and I'm able to sit still for some time, in a quiet place with my mind in a peaceful state. Then that is yoga, right?
Yeah.
But all these practices, or the methods that Patanjali has given, that is also yoga, but they are the methods. They are the methods to attain what I want to achieve. There is one more, which is, again, that was my favorite one earlier. Because, I come from the Vaishnava tradition. So joining of Atma with Paramatma.
Yes.
So there was a disconnect happened, and we identified ourselves with the external world, and we are roaming around. But there is this craving, right? That yes, we need to go back. Now that journey back, that is through this method of yoga.
Yes.
So, it's almost the same. It's
It
just
is very
that
similar.
maybe it is very similar. It's just that because, yeah, ultimate anandam you get in Satchit Ananda. Anand, you are going to be in Ananda in Samadhi state, or in the Atma Paramatma joining union. So it's the same.
Yeah.
So that was, and like in Atha Yoga Anushasanam, where I mentioned that preliminary, for me, I need to be able to be here and now. If I have to study Yoga Sutra, like suppose, say, now we are talking about Yoga Sutra, we have some experience. Now we are here and now, right? So we are, and that now word is very powerful, because it's infinite. Now, see, past is over, future is unknown, right? But
we
now
only
is
have the
infinite.
now.
We only have now. So now means, that is yoga. Because you're going to be in this now through all your studies. So that is one meaning that I have understood. Be here and now. And that is going to be your preliminary work. How you can achieve that state of, to be in a state of here and now. And take your study. So then he talks about Anushasana. So I will just, there is a flow, so I'll just tell you, then you can button. So Anushasana, lot of these definitions they give, but for me, the closest to me is it's a discipline. Because, see, like I mentioned, discipline cannot be enforced, right? Discipline has to be, it's a commitment to myself, to know myself. That is my commitment, right? So a discipline is if you enforce it, like, then it becomes like a rule. People hate to follow it. Like, see, today we are locked down, right? I know we have to, but some of them are walking around. They cannot sit idle. We have accepted, because we know that we know the dangers of it, stepping out. So we have, but there are people who maybe there is no option, so they're walking around. But for them, it is enforced. Right?
Yes.
They say, you know, the human man is actually uncivilized. One of my teachers used to tell me that you just remove the police force from the world, humanity will be finished in no time.
Because they cannot control themselves.
They can, yeah, because unless you, so that then what happens is you're enforcing this discipline, so people are listening, then it becomes like a rule, right? But in yoga, it's opposite. You cannot enforce a discipline. Then you will not be, then you are again identifying with something somebody has enforced on you, right? So the goal is to commit yourself, and there are some techniques that I follow. Maybe you can add your point, and then I will tell you what is the technique that I use to be disciplined.
So for me, actually, in terms of discipline, this entire sutra for me was a reminder of what I brought to the table, of where I was headed onwards in terms of quality, actually, in terms of what I knew, and to give direction to it. So for me, it was a mind-based practice. For me, it was actually of how I understood yoga, or how I understood any of the practice, was a means for spiritual evolution. And for that spiritual evolution, it involved the buddhi for me. It involved right now to go to, to have an intellectual ability to discern, to understand, and then see the bigger picture, so that you could actually, not you or I, so that we, or people, or the practitioner, actually gets to see the self. So maybe it is because I am more inclined towards the Sankhya philosophy already, that I already see it in my mind that particular way. So that is how I usually defined yoga, or as the practice towards it. So
I think you're doing a lot of Sankhya study these days, because I hear you talking about
Sankhya
it
all the time.
No, I envy you.
No, actually I don't do the Sankhya study all the time. It's just that when I'm studying the sutras, the background is Sankhya, so for me to understand the sutra, and when I work through the commentary, it does work through the Sankhya philosophy. So even in the commentary, the explanation is always coming from Sankhya. It's always informed by Sankhya. So which then brings me on to our next the sutra, because that is what is usually considered as the definition. People look at definition.
Just to, sorry to interrupt you, I'll just talk about the preparation that I do, or even I share it with my students, how how we can really discipline, and this has worked for me, and I hope some of your audience and my audience will be able to benefit from this, because because it starts with Anushasana. So we need to spend some time on trying to discipline ourselves. So when we say discipline, what is it? There are various ways of disciplining a child. So there are some simple techniques. We don't have to do big things. Simple thing to start off is, they say, you first learn to say no to yourself first. We need to learn to say no to ourselves. We have not learned to say no to ourselves, but never say no to others. That is because of the ahimsa part. That will come later, because ahimsa Patanjali is already mentioned. So try and not say no to others. But see, I know, some of our colleagues may not agree with this, like saying no, but it's in a different way. Okay, so this is a yogic way of thinking, because the idea is to kind of really move in a space where you can attain extreme bliss and there is a price to pay for that. Like because sometimes they say when you have to say no, you have to say no, but it could create problems. So I guess Patanjali has seen it, and then has written it. But there are other philosophies with Krishna's, Bhagavad Gita. He teaches us. So it has to be a blend of everything. But this is my understanding. Now, how do I proceed? So it's very simple. What I do is, in a simple way. Idea is not to have like many big plans. Like, say, don't come up with big rules for ourselves. We can just say, okay, I'm going to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, right? I'm going to do my asana practice, and then at sharp 5:30 I'm going to sit for my meditation, and I am sticking to this every day, right? And cultivating that discipline. And then slowly, because training the mind. See, we come with, as you said, you're going to gunas and the memory, the what do you call this, sanskaras. It's not easy, because even after die, these sanskaras are roaming around, until it takes another birth. So samskaras are going to be there. It's not easy. So you need to build. So Krishnamacharya says that how you kill a samskara is to build a new samskara and practice it. So we may not be used to getting up at this Brahma Muhurta. So maybe start small like that. Wake up a little early, go to sleep early, and wake up early, and start. Make just simple, small steps. And just let me see if I've covered all my regarding the preparation for discipline. Perfect. So that is one thing. And another thing that I just want to add, that it's amazing that you started these study group in February, because it is actually a big step towards this discipline, right? Because we are taking sutra by sutra, and we are revisiting. We are getting an opportunity to read about thoughts of other teachers, and you are living this Yoga Sutra literally, because and that's what you wanted to do, and that's why you came to this field, and then you are taking this to a larger audience. So our understanding needs to be more solid, because this is for teachers like us, Yoga Sutra. It is not for students, because they say maybe when we discuss when we reach the drashta, I will talk about it.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
So it brings us then nicely.
So does it make sense to you?
It does. It does, because there was one thing that you said in terms of saying no. So I study philosophy as well, on once a week, and in that there is an interesting part which a philosopher is called to for the rest of the philosopher's life, and that is the element of sacrifice. Okay, that to achieve the higher ethical value, or to go towards that goal, the philosopher always has to sacrifice. And sacrifice is not like something big. Sometimes they begin with small things that you set your intention to. Even if you fail, that you still revisit. And I remember we had this conversation on one of the Facebook group, one of the comments, and when I said the thing that I always have is showing up, because we might actually not succeed the first time, and we'll fail because we are fallible, and we'll make mistakes, but the point is that, okay, I messed up today, I'm still showing up tomorrow, because I am committed to the practice. So that commitment is also that earnest commitment that we take to the practice and to the discipline of yoga and the study, right? So this brings us then to the second sutra, because this is where, again, when we talk about what is yoga, and many people, so when we answer the question also, what is yoga, because it has so many different definitions, unfortunately, what many people do is, with the translated version, They pick a part of the definition from this scripture and then pick a part from another scripture and pick a part from another scripture, and then finally make a cocktail version,
Right,
which
right.
is not authentic, but usually suits our
Mm,
purpose. It is to
right.
justify maybe mistakes that we do, or practices that we're not comfortable letting go of. And we say, you
Mm,
know, to suit my position today, this is an example, and to suit one today, it's another one. But in the sutras, particularly, yoga is called upon as a state of stillness, and it's a
right,
stillness of what he calls as the vrittis of the mind. So
right,
where
right,
it is exactly that, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So what is it,
right,
and what are these vrittis? Where do they come from? And
right.
what causes these? What causes these fluctuations in our mind? What causes us to be excited sometimes and to be really dull and lethargic some other times? And then what actually is the path to stillness, and why that path to stillness? Right?
Right, right. You know, you're right. There is a lot of misconception about the main sutra. Unfortunately, this is the definition sutra, and one must understand this in such a way that you don't make a mistake. Because if you make a mistake here, then the rest of the book is going to be difficult, or you may be learning something wrongly, and or maybe it will take many more years for you to reach somewhere that you set out to reach. Because that's why it took, as you said, it took a lot of time, and groping in the dark, without understanding what is this chitta, what is this smrit. Even today, I'm not so clear about it, but at least I know what I need to do, to make my day fruitful. And I learned it from this sutra, so I will share that little bit, and then maybe you can take it on from there. So yoga, we discussed what is yoga, and he himself has given this definition, and this is what we need to achieve. So if you do chitta vritti nirodha, then you can be in yoga, and that yoga can be anything for you: samadhi, or you know which is the other definition for yoga. There are a couple of others, which may be slightly different from samadhi. I think there's a couple I can't suddenly recollect, because I think about these two whenever I think of yoga. I discuss these two: Atma, Paramatma, and Samadhi. These are the simplest ones, easy, and then we can just talk about it. But what happens is, why this in the translations are going wrong, because there is no equivalent word for chitta vritti nirodha in English. There is not, you cannot translate it. There is no perfect word for it, but we can use certain words and try to understand it better. So what I do is, what I have done is, like, I kind of look at it like, what is chitta? What is the nature of chitta? So this is anyway coming from Sankhya, right? Chitta. So it has four aspects, right? The four aspects: manas, buddhi, ahankara, and chitta is also part of it. Chitta is the kind of a canvas on which these three parts play their roles, right?
The screen of
Oh,
sorts.
yes, it's kind of a screen where a movie is played, right? So that is the kind of that's a beautiful way of understanding it. So now, what happens? So the modifications, vrittis. So modification, these four aspects of chitta is the they are the modifications. That is what I've understood, and all those things are happening inside this. So you can say these four aspects of chitta are the modifications. So mind, your buddhi, ahankara, these three. And why this the problem happens when there is no coordination between these three aspects, right? Because a mind is very powerful. It is actually 10 plus 1 mind, your manas, because indriyas are controlled by manas.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it is a very powerful one, and it can kind of make you do many things, even kill people, right? So even though your indriyas are just instruments, they cannot kill anything, they cannot hurt anybody, but it's the mind which does it. And what, according to me, now, how do we, get a hold of this? How do you bring a nirodha? So first we need to understand what is chitta vritti, right? So now, in a simple example, I can say, why there should be a coordination. Unless we establish a coordination between these three faculties, that is your manas, buddhi, and ahankara, we are going to fail in this path. So, and then we will be identified with something or the other. We cannot reach. See, here we are at a student stage, right? If we have to move to a seer stage, that is a person, anyway, I'll talk about it, a seer stage, then we need to kind of really establish a coordination between these three aspects. Now, how do we do that? Now, I can tell you a simple example, maybe I hope it'll clarify my thought, is that, think of this as a workshop, think of our body as a workshop, right? And your manas is the factory supervisor. He is responsible for import and export, purchase, on all those things. So he handles that department, and it's a very important one. Then you have a finance department, right, which is the lifeline. Now, imagine these two are functioning, and there is this ego, where CEO is sitting there, right? So, and he has his own different ideas. Now, what happens is, now if there is no coordination between manas and finance, what will happen? The company is going to fail miserably, right? If these two are not listening to each other. But if you bring in a coordination between these three, then you have a successful organization, right? So it's the same thing that applies to us, right? How can we bring in that coordination? So for me, the definition for nirodha, I know that they all say that about nirodha being controlled, restrained, but I feel that if you practice control every day, see, you don't like to be controlled in the first place. That's why we have come to yoga space, right? I left a job, right? And because I don't want to report to somebody, and I don't want to be controlled. And then you come to yoga and you say you need to control your mind.
Your mind.
So yeah, so it is like, again, going back to the corporate life, I said, no, I am not going to say that nirodha is control. There is no translation. But what we could do, and what I thought the best word would be cultivation. So cultivation of your mind. So cultivate your mind to establish coordination in between these four aspects, between the modifications, right? So when you cultivate, so what happens is when there is a coordination between these three, then you are in a nirodha state. And how do you do that? Is by cultivating. So cultivating can be like a simple example, like how we cultivate the land. There is a process, right? There is a process involved.
I just want to come in here for a while though, because so for me, actually, instead of cultivating, right? That's a new word for me. I haven't thought of it, but I'm seeing where it's coming from. Because, so, normally there is that resistance to the term control or restraint, because it feels like someone is putting an external barrier to a choice that you have. It's a barrier to your choice, your barrier to choice of thinking. But
right.
because it's the mind, and because that mind field in itself, that mind space, and vrittis are actually described as just that. They are those ripples. It's like they're constantly moving because of a factor that is disturbing it and causing excited ripples, or it is just more tamasic and more slowed down. So it's more like it's not that it's not moving, it's holding on and it's still feeling out of place. But Nirodha at that point in time for me comes to a point of stillness. So it stills these waves. But the point to note here and to remember is that in the sutra in itself, the choice of words is that in the sutra, Patanjali doesn't add the word sarva vritti. He doesn't add the word all vrittis. He doesn't
Yes.
say that all your vrittis need to be controlled, because some vrittis, some that need your cognition because of your indriyas, because of your manas, that cause cognition, should be allowed.
I can just add. I can just add a bit there. He has given those 5 vrittis, right? Because he says, oh, vrittis are only those that can be controlled. So those vrittis that cannot be controlled are not included here.
Are not.
So
Yeah.
So only those vrittis that can be controlled are included as chitta vrittis here.
As the vrittis of the chitta. Yeah.
So what you said is correct.
So because, initially even in understanding that when we talk about cognitive vrittis, he says cognitive vrittis are also yoga. That is stilling cognitive vrittis. Cognitive vrittis being the ones that we sense, that we cognize because of our senses. And that's why when we talk about pratyahara later, as a form, pratyahara is then when you overcome these senses, because then you're overcoming the gunas. You're overcoming what you can sense because of all of these. And then you're going to a place of, I don't sense. You're overcoming your Annamaya Kosha in a way. And
you're right, because what I was talking about is more of a practical way. It is definitely, when you are sitting for your meditation, you may have to put in everything. Maybe we don't have the right word, restraint or control or anything, but maybe you have to do certain things to come to reach a state of samadhi. But what from our day-to-day life, that's why I was telling you, like, how do I apply it in my life? So now what happens, like, if there is no coordination, like I mentioned, then you cannot take a decision, right? So like now what is happening, you can look at now what is happening.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to ask that as our current example. We are in a place where we are not in control. We're not in control.
Plus you see how I look at the world leaders today, the G20 or G7, and I see, nobody has got a clue. No leader has got a clue on, what is happening, what they need to do. But there are some leaders who are, in a better state, I feel, have taken quick decisions, right? Some, like for example, China, they have taken some of the other East Asian countries, they have put in place. Vietnam, India has put. So there are few leaders who have quick decisions. Now, how do you take quick decision, right? Because now if your manas is pulling you in different directions, right, with all the 10 senses or the 10 indriyas, it is pulling you, and buddhi is telling you, okay, put a log down, but your manas is not listening. It is thinking about how it will impact the economy, and then it is dragging on, so now how will you take a decision? So you need that's why I was talking about coordination. You establish a coordination between these three, then you are able to make a quick decision. See, you can listen to your buddhi, and you can understand why buddhi is saying this, and take a decision, right? And see what happens. Now this is what is helping me. I'm able to take better decision. Otherwise, sometimes even I have seen myself struggling, like, should I do this, should I not do this? And by the time I do it, it's too late.
So yeah, and which brings us then also, if we're talking about the vrittis then, right, in terms of the decision making or in any of that, when it comes to regular people, right? When the sutras that come into play for us today, of how we are feeling, how we are processing all of these things, because when your vrittis are not in balance, you're looking at a state of stress. You're looking at a state
Absolutely.
of
Absolutely.
our everything. Our decision making is hindered.
You need to bring that equilibrium.
Yes,
You need to
and
bring those to a state of equilibrium.
That is another word for nirodha.
That is a word.
Equilibrium.
That is another word.
It just stills. So then that actually brings us to the third sutra, doesn't it? It actually brings us to that sutra. Would you like to say that? Would you like to chant it?
Yes, yes, sure.
Tadadrashtu.
Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam vrittisarupyam itaratra. I think we will take these two together since we are running out of time. Yeah.
So both of these are referring now, they're bringing in the seer. Right. This is when we actually are talking about once the vrittis are stilled, when we witness ourselves, we witness our true self, or we're witnessing who is witnessing us or who is seeing us, and we witness the seer then. Sometimes it can be so confusing, the words that we use for this philosophy.
Absolutely. I know, it is confusing, and that's why this is a learning for this. It is for teachers.
Yeah.
It is mainly for teachers, and there needs to be a teacher should have given some preliminaries for the student to practice before coming to these studies. But I think we were fortunate, to get the blessings of our teachers. We were able to plus time and to read some of these books from various masters. Now, I just want to add one thing towards the previous one, because I think probably you were not recording it. So what I wanted to say was, and then I will move on to the next one about the Nirodha part, about the previous one. So I just want to read out, this is what I keep reading for myself also, as what I need to do on a daily basis. So it is very simple, like cultivate, coordinate all the aspects of the mind, that is your chitta, your modifications, basically. Cultivate that mind which leads to a state of wisdom, where that mind is fit enough to attain the highest state of samadhi. And that's what yoga is. So cultivation and coordination of all the aspects, it will lead you, like we mentioned, it will lead you to a state of equilibrium. Then what happens? Then the third one, tada drishtu swarupe avasthanam. Then, therefore, the seer is established in his own true nature. Essential nature. Right? So now comes to the question, swarupa. Now, what is this swarupa? And who is the seer? Now, like I keep saying that you are a student until you reach until you accomplish the chitta vritti nirodha. So once you accomplish chitta vritti nirodha, then you are a seer. Now you are eligible to go into the next, the practice of yoga, the methods, to practice the methods. So because, until you are identified, because a seer is, so the definition of seer is, you are identified with your own essential nature. Our own essential nature is nothing but peace, your happiness and joy, the samadhi state. That is our true essential nature. Now, how do we get there? So he has given the techniques, right? That chitta vritti nirodha is, in a state of equilibrium. So cultivate your mind and reach a seer stage. Then you are eligible to practice the rest of the methods. Otherwise it's going to be very difficult. Imagine if you have to start with yama niyamas. If unless you understand, right, about your own, until you know yourself, how can you know others? How can you really discipline yourself in the first place?
So are
So
you
do you want
saying
to add
that,
something?
no, I mean, I do, but I was just curious. Is your understanding that for us to progress from one sutra to the other in this understanding, because this is still the Samādhi Pāda, right? That we would have
Yes.
had to fully understand and experience the one sutra before you move on to the next?
The thing is here, I never learned sutra by sutra, like 1, 2, 3, 4, not like that. It's concept wise that I've learned. That's why I was telling you these 4 sutras are very important. Now, maybe in our next class, maybe we can talk about theory of kleshas, which is very important. Because it can add benefit straight away to someone's practice. Theory of kleshas, then theory of the Vyuha model we can discuss that. Then Ashtanga theory, the 8 ladders, or Kriya Yoga. So what I would suggest, maybe we can, in our discussions, maybe we'll continue studying sutra by sutra in our Facebook group, but in our weekly chat, we can take these concepts. It'll add more value, and we can reach quickly to the audience with these important concepts. Because if they understand this Ashtanga, then it's easy to understand the rest of it. So
yeah, true. I think in these, especially in the Sutra 3, the third sutra, and I fully agree with what you're saying, that concepts actually help us understand. Because if you don't have a concept, and that the concept of it also, right, even if it's Ashtanga or Klesha, the concept of knowing what it is helps us navigate the sutras. Because the sutras are just the codes, so to understand them, you need to have a theory or a concept behind it, that you can learn go into the depth of it. Because if you go the other way around, then you can go any which way. Then you can have your vikalpa in place. Actually, it can be imaginary. If you start with a sutra and you just leave it there for everyone's interpretation. Whereas if you come from a concept, then at least you hone in and you deepen that thought.
Krishnamacharya says you need to actually live this. It's not just remain a theory in your mind to teach your students. You need to start living. So that's where I started making my own notes, to how I can implement these things in my own life and in my own teaching. So otherwise, it used to be very difficult for me to, tell them, because you can't explain the whole of Sankhya theory, right? Now I have not even touched Sankhya, but I have kind of, taken the essence. I'm not even mentioned Sankhya in my notes. Because if I, because in a deeper study, yes, when I talk to you, definitely I have to bring in Sankhya. But when I teach to, some corporates who wants to learn these sutras, I don't bring in those. I just give them practical, like, what can you do? So they do it, but unknowingly, because they do take decisions, but they don't know which aspects of their mind is, helping them to make those decisions. Yes. And why sometimes sometimes they don't know why they are not able to take decision. Sometimes they take a wrong decision. Sometimes they're too late. So now, then I tell them, start cultivating, then bring in that discipline of cultivation of your mind by coordinating the faculties of the mind. then you reach that nirodha state. And nirodha is the most beautiful word. So we should just start using nirodha instead of stilling, or sometimes I used to use restraint, and now I stopped using it. I say bring it to a nirodha state. I mean, that is my takeaway, that we should not, there are certain words that are used in England in English in the same way, like karma. So the same way we should start using nirodha, or the closest is an equilibrium or a cultivation. Now,
it is not also,
when it comes to the nature,
it isn't always the closest, because there are some words that really don't have an English translation.
No, in fact, these 4 words have no translation at all. But people, some of them, some masters have given the closest as cultivation. Some masters.
It's like how you define, or how do you describe the word ananda? You can't.
Absolutely, you can. And imagine if you use control or suppression, or some of them use repression. So imagine if you have to repress, your life will be repressed, right? Throughout your life, you're repressing. So it is a more of a negative, anglicized, or maybe a biblical, where they bring in this negativity to bring out positivity, but it's in a different way. But in our tradition, we don't. There is no negativity at all in Yogasūtra.
In the word also.
So we need to use, so it is just a way of cultivating your mind to reach a state where you are established in your own true nature, which is your essential nature. Now, those who can see their essential nature is a seer. Otherwise, the fourth one is otherwise, at other times, that is, he is not established in his real nature. He is identified with the vrittis. So he is, he takes a different form in that. That is, again, the pull of,
the vrittis.
the gunas.
Of the gunas, yes.
Play of gunas. So it is just, the fourth one is just reiterating.
It's just
reiterating that, but it is not wasting. He's saying, so you better remain in the nirodha state, right? To continue into the next, to continue practicing the methods of yoga. And it is a science. It's not like, you just go on reading something and try to understand. But when you are studying, you need to be in that state of nirodha state to progress in your own practice, even while practicing yama niyamas, because you need to, suppose a simple thing now, they say, suppose you take your ahimsa. Now, there is so much written about ahimsa, but nobody ever thought that what Patanjali is talking about is nothing but love. Right? He is talking about love, because it says ahimsa means what? It is non-killing, non-injury, non-hurting through word, speech, and action. Right? And are we running out of time? So maybe we can wrap up here. So maybe I will just add, I can come back to that, and about when we discuss yama niyama.
I mean, we are, I know we've taken a lot of time, but it's not just that. It's just that I also have a lot of, people running around here in the background.
Okay. I know we have taken a lot of time. I know it is such an important sutra, and it deserves the time. So maybe what I could say is to wrap up about when we are in this nirodha state. So this I attended one webinar of Mr. Sridharan, who's my teacher at 𝐘𝐨𝐿. He says that considering the situation, share this to everyone. How you can see through this phase. So he has given this idea. Now we know that abhyasa vairagya, right, is a definition of nirodha, abhyasa and vairagya. Now he says, in place of abhyasa, what you need to do now is personal hygiene, washing hands, taking bath twice, practice this every day as abhyasa. Maintaining social distance is detachment, right? So abhyasa and vairagya you have done. And so nirodha has happened. Then tapas, the kriya yoga part, tapas. So he says asana, pranayama, and ahara niyama under tapas. So what you do, asana, prana, and he's given pranayama as the most important practice here, and we know why, because of the immunity factor. Now he gives an important advice. This is coming from the Bhagavad Gita anyway. We need to eat the right food. I think Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about the vegetarian diet, sattvic diet. Now he says eat foods that increase immunity. Obviously vegetables, but he says now especially do not eat raw vegetables. Eat cooked vegetables, but consume within 3 hours. Fruits you can eat, but raw. But other vegetables and other grains, it has to be cooked and has to be consumed within 3 hours, which we know. Then the swadhyaya, what we do is chanting. So the best way to negate the negativity is chanting, and yes, and it also gives us strength and courage. When you are chanting, and saying read some good books. Obviously, immense scriptures or something related to that, or even very good books are available. You can pick them. Yeah. Then finally, the Ishvara Pranidhana. He says the most important thing now is to obey rules and the authority. So listen to them, right, and see through this phase. So I'll conclude my remarks with this bit of advice from my teacher. So over to you.
But that is important. That is important because it was so one of the aims or one of the reasons for this. Sai, I lost your video.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons for us
I'm running out of charge.
Okay.
Running out of charge.
All right.
It may go, but we can continue.
Okay. So one of the reasons we had this also was because we wanted to draw a connection, to draw a parallel between sutras as just, initially as a swadhyaya, because understanding the sutras was swadhyaya. But then the application of the sutras to what was going on today or what we were experiencing.
Luvena, just give me a second. I'll just take the charger. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I am. Okay.
Yes.
So, it was for the, how do I call it? It was for connecting it with everything that's happening around. And so when we say that, even though we aren't talking about the yamas and the niyamas right now, and they come in much later, it is still important because most people, most practitioners, or even the teachers, or any of the people who are watching us right now, do connect with an understanding of yamas and niyamas because they've heard of it, even if they don't know the depths of it. But it's important to realize that as yoga practitioners, and we'll always be yoga practitioners even if we teach, that yamas and niyamas are not, they are not bound in in a boundary. They don't have a boundary which says no, a yama is only supposed to mean this. So if you talk about, say, ahimsa, it's not always physical violence. It is not just that. Ahimsa in all the possible experiences, ahimsa in thought. So when you talk about obeying rules, right? So the obeying of rules is where it is about everything around us. It is about the situation and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So I think as we wrap up this conversation now, these sutra conversations, it has been interesting to see how we explore it. I know we've taken our own understanding of it in terms of how we understand the sutras, how you shared how you put them into practice in terms of right from how we understand or where it begins, what we understand by the definition, and how we actually relate to the definition of yoga, and what it is compared to everything that happens around us, to even world situations and the current global pandemic. And then going on also that even though this happens, even though this is happening, at the end of the day, it's happening on a very subjective level. It's happening to us, or it's happening around us. And it is when we bring that manasic view, it is when we also actually go beyond the manasic view to use a buddhi to discern the whole thing and say, this is happening and this is my body that's experiencing it. But I also notice that the seer or the buddhi is beyond that. There is an objective, from subjective, it moves to objective, like, okay, it is happening versus I am the one who is experiencing it. So you move away from the senses and so it is you become you see yourself as a character instead of being the player and experiencing all of it. You actually separate from that, and you can once you see that separation, then you see what is the seer, and you see who is the seer and who is the non-seer, or who is the self with the lowercase s, and who is the self, the purusha here that we refer to all the time. And whoever that is not is someone else. The moment you start identifying with the vrittis, then you become something else. The moment you start identifying with all the panic around you, then you become panicked. And one of the practical ways of actually doing this and not becoming the vrittis is to maybe stop reading the newspapers. Just stop reading the newspapers.
I'll tell you one thing, how we can, it's one of the technique of training your mind is, it's a very simple technique. Like suppose, you like sweets and you want to eat sweets, and your mind is telling, take one more. And we have all faced it. You're like, let me have this. But your mind says, and whatever your mind says, your indriyas will follow. The hand will go. But use your discrimination and tell the body, to tell the mind, okay, you can have it, but I am not going to move my lips, right? And you practice it a couple of times, and what happens is when you don't act on your mind's order, the thought naturally dies away. And I have experienced it I have practiced, and it works for me. So you are developing a kind of a power in your indriyas to tell the mind that I am not interested, but you can have it. So
okay, I have not heard of this technique before, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, maybe they should do like, people who are so addicted to looking at the scores of how many died and how many infected. Maybe they should practice this because it makes no sense. It's like people are treating it like match, like a cricket score. Like how many India scored, how many US scored, how many it has become like a game. Whereas
a painful one also. I think it's a fear, Sai. At the end of the day, it's a fear, and people are.
Yogis, they say, you should never have fear.
Yogis don't have fear. Yes, yogis shouldn't. But when we're talking about a general trend, and it is, see, it also brings to question then sometimes, who is a yogi actually? Who is one? Are you, if you do an asana, are you a yogi? Or if you think like a yogi, are you a yogi? Again, it comes back to the same definition.
Can I give you a simple answer to that? Who is a yogi?
Sure.
A yogi is one who can sit for 4 hours and 36 minutes without moving.
I think that's why when the previous video stalled and you were frozen to one extent, you chose to say that you are the yogi who's still. All right.
But
well, anyway,
it's not easy. But they say even before starting the Yogasūtra study, they say you need to have asana vidya. Because otherwise, how will you sit with your spine erect? How will you receive it? So, but anyway, it's been good chatting today over this beautiful text on yoga. We will continue. Maybe we can offline discuss what could be our next topic.
Yeah.
But we have, I think, touched in a reasonable way the key points from the first four most important sutras.
Hmm. Yes, I think everything else after this goes into each sutra, just builds into what it is, what do you mean by it, and this is what it is. So it's just that usual communication style, and one thing builds into the other. But individual
Right.
sutras then act, they develop, they add their skeletons, but then they meet up into, they add bulk to it with every subsequent sutra. So yes, I think we should be able to stop at this point in time. Sai, thank you so much for us having our sutra conversations today. And it has been a lovely conversation. It has been enlightening. You've given us a new tool as well, which I'm going to try. Not for the scores, but I'm going to try it when I have that speech the next time and see if it works. I'm sure it will. But for all of
Train
you who
your
are watching,
train your indriyas.
yes, I will have to train my indriyas that way. You're right. For all of you who are watching, I know this wasn't a live session, so we couldn't take questions online and as it happened in live. But please do share your questions below, and we would be able to get to those questions. Both Sai and I, you can just ask those questions, and we'll be able to put or answer them, or at least give our take or our understanding on them. You can follow Sai on Instagram. Where is the best way for people to follow you, Sai?
Instagram or Facebook.
Okay.
So Instagram you can share it there.
Okay, so I will add that to the comments or in the caption. And for me, you're already there on my page, on the Curvy Yogi page, but the same handle on Instagram as well. And I'll put both the handles in. If you'd like to ask anything further, please feel free. And of course, as we said, if you found value in this, and if you'd like to make a donation, if you'd like to support Indian teachers, then please find the PayPal details, which are also there in the caption. And we will see you all next week, Sai. Yeah, we'll be having a conversation next week, and we will let you know what we'll be speaking about in terms of philosophy. Until then, stay well, stay safe, stay indoors, follow the rules, follow the yamas and niyamas, wash your hands, eat healthy, eat safe, stay happy, and namaste. I will see you all soon.